Hey, thanks for tuning in today. My name is John S. Pennington Jr., and this episode is entitled Evolution versus the Bible. And what I do in this episode is compare the science of evolution with the depiction of Moses as he wrote how creation happened in the Bible. Now, if you think about it, evolution says that we all have common ancestors, that humans and plants, the tree outside your house, at one point in history has a common ancestor. And all scientists, pretty much all scientists on the planet, agree upon that evolution is a fact. Now, but what science has a problem right now, there's a controversy in science today. No one really knows how life actually started. Because what happened is about 4.5 billion years ago, something very large crashed into our Earth and it became molten rock, and a piece of that flew off and became our moon. And a few 100 million years later, as the Earth cooled down, as soon as it was fertile enough, or as soon as it possibly could spring forth life, life began on Earth. And most scientists believe that it all came from a pool of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, water, and some burst of energy ignited life. Well, there's another group of scientists that have come on in the last decade, and they have questioned that idea, and they believe that life was delivered here in microbial life form on the side of an asteroid. And it's very logical. Listen to the argument here. They say to the one group of scientists, wait a minute, if the Earth can spring forth life almost as soon as it was physically possible to spring forth life, why wasn't there multiple strands of life? Why do we all have one common ancestor billions of years ago that created trees billions of years later and humans billions of years later? If it sprang forth life, and let's just say, for example, hypothetical example, life sprang forth in Australia first, 4.3 billion years ago. Then how come another strain of life just didn't pop up in Siberia 2.2 billion years ago? And how come another strain of life just didn't combust and come into existence 1 billion years ago in the Middle East? That's a problem for scientists. They're saying that life sprang forth one single time on Earth, almost at the very essence or the very moment it was possible to spring forth life, and it came forth only one time in the history of the Earth. Well, so scientists say that doesn't sound too logical. Therefore, is there a different or a competing theory? And the competing theory is that maybe a piece of microbial life was attached to an asteroid and hit Earth about 4.3 billion years ago in this watery, very moist planet, and that started life on Earth. That's the controversy in science today. But think about what that means. If that is true, then that means plants or microbial life existed before our sun and our Earth were created. Meaning, if there's an asteroid floating around in space with a microbial life on it, it existed before our sun and moon were created. They had to be floating around before that. And guess what Moses says in the book of Genesis? Moses says the first thing that was created was light, which agrees with the Big Bang Theory. He says the second thing that was created were clouds. And Moses says water with some clouds or firmament above and some clouds or firmament below, which basically agrees with the Big Bang Theory. There was light, then clouds. But Moses says that plants were created next on day 3 before our sun and moon were created. Well, if scientists ever do prove that microbial life came on the side of asteroid to fertilize this Earth, they will be proving Moses once again wasn't writing fiction, that he was writing nonfiction. And Moses once again will be validating the Big Bang Theory if this one group of scientists ever prove their theory. Now, the second thing is on evolution is the book of Genesis says that all plants came from the ground. And they said, the book of Genesis also says that all of the fowl, the birds in the air, came from the ground. It says the beasts came from the ground, and Adam came from the dust of the ground. So one time I had a friend ask me, he said, are you telling me that every living organism on earth came from the same substance? And I said to him, listen, I didn't write the Bible. I'm just reading the Bible, right? So when I see a bird fly through the air, I don't know how Moses, 3,300 years ago, if he was sitting down to write fiction, would have said, hey, that bird flying through the air? Yeah, it came from the ground. I don't know how he would come up with that. Just like if I told you, hey, there's a huge jetliner airplane flying through the air, and that jet airliner came from the ground. Well, what I just told you was true. The metal came from the ground. The plastics came from the ground. The rubber on the tires came from the ground. The fuel in the tanks came from the ground. So the fact that I tell you that that plane or that jet came from the ground is absolutely true. The fact that I don't tell you how long it took man to make that plane from the ground doesn't mean it's not true. Just like if God doesn't tell you how long it took to take some ground and make a bird, the fact that he doesn't tell you how he did it or how long it took him to do it doesn't mean it's not true. Therefore, I'm sitting here reading the Bible and reading the evolution science, and I'm saying, wait a minute, is Moses validating evolution or is evolution validating Moses? Because he says we all came from the same substance, the ground. Evolution basically says the same thing. Now, you can ask yourself, why didn't Moses go into the DNA and all those technical terms? Well, Moses uses the term dust of the ground when he talks about Adam's body. And 3,300 years ago, the smallest particle known to man was dust. When you see sunshine coming through a window on a cloudy day, and you got a little dust in the air, that would be the smallest particle any person would know. So rather than Moses going into DNA and the whole thing, maybe Moses knew it, maybe he didn't know it, I don't know, but he uses the smallest thing that anyone would understand 3,300 years ago, that Adam's body was created from the dust of the ground. So therefore, I'm asking the question once again to all my scientist friends, how did Moses do it? If you believe that Moses was writing fiction, then how did he get so much stuff so right? His education 3,300 years ago, or anyone's education 3,300 years ago, could not have put all this together. Anyway, if you want more detail, come to chapter 3 of this book, Big Bang Theory versus the Bible. Chapter 3 is Evolution versus Creation, and it's by John S. Pennington Jr. Pick up your copy today. Thanks for listening. Listen, we do not know, the people that do all these, they do the edits, the cuts, the scripts. We don't know if you like these videos unless you subscribe. If you subscribe, we'll keep making more. My name is John S. Pennington Jr. Thanks for listening.